Know your place, nurse. Eyes down. She read the injury before anyone else. Seconds later, the hero depended on her calm. Stay with us. What looks like humiliation turns into a moment no one expected because the truth has a way of breaking silence. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. Have you ever rewritten your own story? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Black Stories Untold with Love, and ring that notification bell for more heartwarming stories that celebrate strength. The stadium pulsed like a living thing. Sound rolled in heavy waves, cheers crashing into each other beneath blinding lights that turned faces into shadows and shadows into judgment. Tens of thousands of voices rose and fell in rhythm, worshiping speed and strength, victory and spectacle. In the middle of it all, almost invisible, Aila Davis moved with quiet purpose. She wore navy scrubs beneath a volunteer vest, her hair pulled back neatly, her posture straight and unyielding. She was beautiful in a way that did not ask for attention. Her presence carried calm, the kind forged by long nights and difficult rooms where lives hung in the balance. While the crowd roared for heroes they believed they knew, Aila walked the sidelines as someone they did not see at all. She had learned that invisibility early, learned how to take up as little space as possible while carrying far more than her share of responsibility. She had learned to keep her eyes forward, her expression neutral, her dignity intact. Tonight should have been no different. Another game. Another shift. Another reminder that competence rarely announces itself. As she passed a row of spectators near the tunnel, a voice drifted down sharp and careless. Someone laughed. Another joined in. A gesture followed, dismissive and cruel. A comment about fetching water, about knowing her place, about how she looked like she belonged anywhere but here. The words landed softly but cut deep, the way they always did. Aila did not stop walking. She never did. She had learned that stopping only invited more. Her jaw tightened for a moment before she smoothed her face back into calm. She told herself it did not matter, that she had work to do, that she was here for reasons far more important than their approval. Still, something shifted inside her. A weight settled behind her ribs, unfamiliar and heavy. The air felt charged, as if the stadium itself was holding its breath. The noise seemed louder now, sharper, pressing in from all sides. Aila glanced toward the field, her trained eyes scanning bodies in motion, noticing patterns others missed. A slight hesitation in a stride, a shoulder dipping lower than it should, a breath taken, half a beat, too late. That was when she saw him. Bradley Lewis moved across the field with controlled power, a presence that commanded attention without effort. Tall, broad-shouldered, impossibly focused. The crowd adored him in the way people adore what they think is untouchable. His name echoed from every section, carried on signs and chants and expectation. He wore pressure like a second skin and made it look effortless. Aila watched him not as a fan, but as a professional. She noticed the tension in his neck, the way his hand brushed his ribs between plays. She saw the cost behind the performance, the strain hidden beneath confidence. To the crowd, he was invincible. To her, he was human. Their eyes did not meet. They did not know each other yet. But something connected them all the same, a thin, invisible thread pulled tight by timing and instinct. Another cheer rose. The lights flared brighter. The ground seemed to vibrate beneath Aila's feet as she took her place near the medical team. Her hands flexed once, steady and ready. Whatever came next, she would meet it head on. She always did. The crowd did not know her name. They did not need to. Not yet, because the night was already bending toward a moment that would force everyone to see her. Bradley Lewis moved beneath the stadium lights like a man forged for spectacle. Every step carried intention. Every pivot drew breath from the crowd. His body was a language the audience believed they understood: strength, speed, dominance, control. They saw the performance and called it greatness. They did not see the cost. Sweat darkened the collar of his jersey long before fatigue should have set in. His jaw clenched between plays, not in anger but restraint. He smiled when the cameras found him because that was part of the job. He nodded to teammates. He lifted his chin to the noise. He carried expectation the way others carried air, without thinking until it began to burn. Bradley had learned early that admiration was conditional. Love from the crowd came with rules. You perform, you win, you endure. There was no space for hesitation, no permission to falter. The lights rewarded excellence and punished vulnerability. So he learned to bury pain beneath precision and silence beneath discipline. From the sidelines, Aila watched him with a different kind of attention. She did not cheer. She did not shout his name. Her gaze moved the way it always did, methodical and sharp. She saw the slight delay when he pushed off his left foot, the way his shoulder dropped a fraction lower than it should after contact, the way his breath caught not from exhaustion, but something deeper, more dangerous. Others saw power. She saw warning signs. She adjusted her stance unconsciously, closer to the field. Her hands rested at her sides, ready without tension. Years of training had taught her to listen to bodies the way musicians listen for wrong notes. Bradley Lewis was playing beautifully, but the melody was strained. Their worlds could not have felt further apart. He existed at the center of adoration, surrounded by chants and cameras and money. She existed at the edges, moving quietly through systems that barely noticed her unless something went wrong. He was celebrated for what he could do. She was dismissed for what people assumed she was, and yet something pulled tight between them. Bradley glanced toward the sideline between plays, a habit he did not question. His eyes passed over faces and equipment until they landed on her. He did not know why he noticed her. She was not loud. She did not wave or stare. She simply stood there, steady as stone in the middle of chaos. For a brief moment the noise softened. He felt it then, a strange grounding, as if the field beneath him had shifted into focus. He shook it off quickly. There was no room for distraction. The next play was already forming. The whistle blew. Bodies collided. The crowd surged to its feet again. Aila felt the change before she saw it. A tightening in the air. A misalignment in movement. Her heart rate adjusted instinctively, not with fear but readiness. This was the moment she lived for, the seconds when clarity mattered more than recognition. Bradley took the snap and drove forward with practiced force. Contact came hard and fast. He absorbed it like he always did. But this time, something was different. Aila saw it in the way his body twisted just slightly off axis. A breath stolen too sharply, a hand that did not come back to position right away. The crowd roared louder, unaware. Bradley pushed through the play because that was what was expected, because stopping meant weakness, because stopping meant questions he did not want to answer. But beneath the roar, beneath the lights, beneath the applause, something inside him faltered. Aila took one step forward. She did not know his name yet. She did not know what he meant to the city, or the franchise, or the crowd that worshipped him. She only knew what she saw and what she felt in her bones. The collision was coming, not just on the field, but between two lives moving toward the same moment from opposite ends of the stadium. And when it came, nothing would be the same again. The hit came with a sound that did not belong to the game. It was not the sharp crack of pads or the familiar rhythm of impact the crowd loved. It was heavier. Final. Bradley Lewis went down hard, his body folding in on itself before hitting the turf with a force that knocked the breath from the stadium. For a fraction of a second, the crowd did not understand what they were seeing. Then the noise drained away as if someone had pulled the plug on the night. Thousands of voices fell silent at once. The light still blazed. The scoreboard still glowed. But the air changed. Fear crept in where excitement had been. Bradley did not move. Aila was already running. She crossed the sideline with purpose, her boots hitting the turf in even strides. The world narrowed to the shape of his body on the ground, the unnatural stillness, the shallow, uneven rise of his chest. She dropped to her knees beside him without hesitation. Her hands were warm and steady as she assessed him, her voice low and calm as she spoke his name for the first time. Bradley's eyes fluttered open, then closed again. His breath came in sharp, broken pulls. Panic flashed across his face, raw and unguarded. The invincible man the crowd adored was gone. In his place was someone fragile and afraid. Aila leaned closer, blocking out the lights, the cameras, the noise beginning to creep back in as confusion turned to speculation. She grounded him with her presence, with her tone, with the certainty in her touch. Breathe with me. Slow. Stay here. I've got you. Others arrived moments later, a blur of uniforms and equipment. Instructions overlapped. Someone hesitated. Someone questioned. A voice from behind her cut through the moment, sharp with doubt. "Are you sure you are supposed to be leading this?" Another voice followed, less subtle, more cruel. "Let the head medic handle it." Aila did not look up. She did not raise her voice. She did not defend herself. She did not explain. She simply continued. Her hands moved with practiced precision. She stabilized his neck. She adjusted his airway. She counted his breaths and guided them back into rhythm. Bradley's fingers twitched, then tightened around the fabric of her sleeve. The contact was instinctive, desperate. He anchored himself to her without knowing why. His breathing slowed just enough to signal hope. The crowd watched in stunned quiet. They saw the cluster of bodies, but not the work being done at the center. They did not hear the steady voice cutting through panic. They did not see the woman kneeling in the grass, holding a life together with skill and calm. Aila felt the weight of eyes on her back and ignored them. This was not about being seen. This was about doing what she had trained, for what she had sacrificed, for what she had been dismissed for too many times to count. When the stretcher arrived, she coordinated the transfer with clear commands that left no room for doubt. The hesitation vanished. The questions stopped. Her authority was undeniable now because it had saved something precious. As Bradley was lifted from the field, his eyes found hers again. There was fear there still, but also something else. Trust, gratitude, a quiet recognition that would linger long after the lights dimmed. The crowd slowly found its voice again, but it was different now, softer, uncertain. They cheered out of habit, not joy. Aila rose from the turf and stepped back toward the sideline, her hands stained green from the grass. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her face remained composed. Behind her, the game would continue eventually. Ahead of her, something far more important had already begun. And the stadium that had forgotten her name would soon learn it. The tunnel was colder than the field, the roar of the stadium replaced by a hollow echo of urgency. Wheels rattled against concrete as Bradley was rushed forward, his body still trembling from shock. The lights above blurred into streaks as pain pulsed through him in slow, heavy waves. Fear crept in where adrenaline had been, sharp and unrelenting. Aila stayed at his side. Her hand never left his shoulder. Her voice never wavered. She spoke to him with the same calm she had learned to carry into emergency rooms at 3 in the morning. The same steadiness she used when families were waiting on answers she had not yet found. Breathe. Stay with me. You are not alone. Each word was placed carefully, a lifeline thrown into dark water. Inside the medical bay, movement exploded around them. Equipment clattered, orders were exchanged, screens lit up with numbers that told a story not everyone knew how to read. Aila read them instantly. Her eyes flicked from his face to the monitors and back again. Something was wrong. Not obvious, not dramatic, but dangerous all the same. She felt it before she could explain it. Bradley's breathing faltered again. His fingers curled tight against the edge of the gurney. His gaze searched the ceiling and then found her. Panic surged in his eyes, unfiltered and human. He had faced crowds of thousands without blinking. This was different. This was the fear of not knowing if your body would obey you again. Aila stepped closer. She adjusted his position with deliberate care, shifting him just enough to ease the pressure no one else had noticed yet. Her hands moved without hesitation, guided by instinct sharpened through years of being the one who had to decide when seconds mattered more than permission. A voice behind her questioned the call. Another hesitated, waiting for confirmation. Protocol demanded caution. Protocol demanded consensus. Aila trusted her judgment. She spoke with clarity and conviction that cut through the noise. Her decision came fast and firm, shaped by experience rather than fear. The room shifted around her as others followed her lead. The delay that could have changed everything vanished. Bradley felt the difference immediately. The tightness in his chest loosened just enough for breath to return. The pain did not disappear, but it softened, pulled back from the edge. His body responded to her intervention as if it recognized safety in her touch. Their eyes locked. Time slowed in that moment. The monitors hummed. The world outside the room faded into irrelevance. There was only her face steady and focused, and his own reflection in her eyes, not as a star or a symbol, but as a man fighting to stay present. He trusted her without question. Aila felt it too. The weight of responsibility settled deeper, but so did something else. Recognition, not fame, not gratitude, something quieter and more profound. The sense of being seen for exactly who she was and what she carried. When the crisis passed, the room exhaled as one. The tension eased, movement slowed, the danger retreated. Aila stepped back then, allowing others to take over as the moment demanded. Her hands trembled just slightly now that it was safe to feel. She tucked them into fists at her sides, grounding herself before anyone could notice. Bradley was stable. The words echoed through the space like a benediction. As he was prepared for transfer, his gaze never left her. He wanted to speak, to ask her name, to hold on to the connection that had anchored him through fear. But the moment slipped away as doors opened and staff moved him onward. Aila watched him go, her heart beating louder than the monitors ever had. She had saved more than a life in that room. She had changed the course of something neither of them could yet name. And somewhere beneath the surface of protocol and professionalism, something irrevocable had begun. The tunnel hummed with nervous energy as Bradley was moved deeper into the stadium, away from the field and the noise that had swallowed his name for years. The bright chaos of the game faded behind concrete walls and heavy doors. Here there was no cheering, only hurried footsteps, clipped voices, and the low mechanical rhythm of wheels rolling forward. Aila walked alongside the stretcher until she was told to stop. She slowed, then halted, standing just outside the inner circle of authority. Her hands rested at her sides, still carrying the memory of his weight and his breath beneath her palms. She watched as others took over with brisk efficiency, their faces serious now, their movements careful. The urgency had changed them. So had she. People noticed. The same spectators who had laughed earlier now stood quiet near the corridor edges. Their eyes followed her not with amusement, but with something closer to unease. They whispered to one another in lowered voices, as if afraid to be heard. Some avoided her gaze entirely. Others looked at her too long, as though trying to reconcile who they thought she was with what they had just witnessed. Aila kept her chin lifted. She had learned that dignity did not require explanation. Still, the shift in the air pressed against her chest. Recognition often arrived late and never gently. Bradley stirred on the stretcher as they approached a secure doorway. His breathing was steadier now, but his face was pale, drawn tight with exhaustion. He turned his head slightly, scanning the corridor as if searching for something he had lost. Then his eyes found her. He lifted his head just enough to speak, his voice rough but clear. He asked for her by name. The words cut through the tunnel like a sudden drop in temperature. Conversations paused, footsteps slowed. Someone hesitated before responding. A staff member leaned closer to him and murmured that she was just a volunteer nurse. Bradley's eyes sharpened. He shook his head with effort, his voice gaining strength despite the strain. He corrected them, firmly, without anger, but without apology either. He said her name again as if it mattered, because it did. Aila felt the impact of it land deep and unexpected. He thanked her. Not loudly, not for the cameras. He thanked her the way people do when they understand something fundamental has been given back to them. His gaze held hers with a sincerity that made the tunnel fall away. In that moment, the world did not see a star and a nurse. It saw two people connected by fear and trust and survival. Aila nodded once, unable to speak. The doors opened. The stretcher rolled forward. The moment passed. As Bradley disappeared into the sterile white beyond the tunnel, Aila stood rooted in place. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, louder now than the crowd ever had been. She felt exposed and grounded at the same time, unsettled by the weight of his acknowledgement. Around her, the whispers continued. People shifted. Some looked ashamed. Some looked thoughtful. No one laughed now. Aila exhaled slowly and turned away. There was still work to do. There always was. But something inside her had shifted permanently. Being seen carried a cost she had not expected. It asked something of her she was not sure she was ready to give. Behind closed doors, Bradley lay back against the gurney, his mind replaying her face, her voice, the certainty she carried into his darkest moment. He held on to it as the doors closed and the noise faded completely. They went their separate ways down different corridors of the same night, but the space between them had been changed, and neither of them would walk away unchanged. The hospital room was quiet in a way the stadium had never been. No chants, no flashing lights, just the steady hum of machines and the soft wash of morning light against white walls. Bradley lay propped against pillows, his body still healing, his movements slower now, deliberate. For the first time in years, there was nowhere he needed to be, and nothing he was expected to perform. He asked for Aila again, not out of obligation or courtesy. He asked because something in him refused to settle until he saw her. The request traveled through channels with raised eyebrows and subtle resistance, but he did not waver. He waited. When Aila stepped into the room, the air shifted gently as if the space itself recognized her. She wore simple scrubs now, no vest, no crowd, no noise, just her presence, steady and unadorned. She paused at the door for a heartbeat, assessing the room the way she always did before entering someone else's vulnerability. Bradley looked at her and smiled. Not the practiced grin the cameras loved, but something softer, unguarded. Relief passed over his face like a tide coming in. He thanked her again quietly, this time without witnesses. His voice carried humility that surprised even him. They talked. At first about small things, his recovery timeline, her schedule, the hospital food that tasted like nothing and everything at once. The conversation moved slowly, testing its footing. Then it deepened, without effort. He asked about her work and listened when she answered. Truly listened. He did not interrupt or redirect or search for himself in her words. Aila noticed. She had learned to measure people by how they held space. Bradley held it gently. He asked questions and waited for answers. He laughed when she made dry observations about life on night shift. The sound was low and surprised, as if he had forgotten how laughter felt without an audience. She smiled without thinking. The ease of it caught her off guard. So did the way he looked at her, not as someone passing through his story, but as someone whose own story mattered. Still, caution lingered in her chest. Years of being underestimated do not fade in a single conversation. She chose her words carefully. She kept parts of herself tucked away where disappointment could not reach. Bradley sensed it and did not push. He spoke instead of pressure of expectation and how it felt to carry the weight of being needed only for what he could produce. He admitted fear without drama. He confessed that the silence of recovery scared him more than the injury itself. In that stillness, he had been forced to listen to his own thoughts. Aila understood that kind of silence. She shared pieces of herself in return, not the polished version, but the honest one. Long shifts, small apartments, the exhaustion of proving competence again and again in rooms that doubted her before she spoke. She did not ask for sympathy. She simply stated facts. Bradley felt something settle in him then. Respect grew into something warmer, something that did not demand or rush. He admired the way she carried her strength quietly, how she did not bend for approval. He saw dignity shaped by endurance and chose to honor it. When she stood to leave, he did not want the moment to end, but he did not say so. He thanked her again and meant it in a way that reached beyond the hospital room. Aila paused at the door and looked back. There was something there now between them, fragile and real, a quiet bond forming in the absence of noise. Not a promise, not yet, just recognition. As she walked down the hall, her heart beat a little faster than before. Not from fear this time, but from possibility, and Bradley watched the door long after it closed, knowing that something essential had begun, not with spectacle, but with stillness. The world found them again, the way it always did, quietly at first, and then all at once. A photo surfaced online, taken from a distance through glass. Bradley seated in a wheelchair near a hospital garden. Aila beside him, leaning in close, her posture attentive, her expression soft. It was an ordinary moment, made extraordinary by strangers hungry for narrative. Within hours, it was everywhere framed and reframed until truth thinned beneath speculation. People talked. They talked about timing and motives, and what a nurse might want from a man like him. They talked about access and advantage and opportunity dressed up as concern. The same mouths that had laughed in the stadium now sharpened their words into questions that carried accusation without evidence. Aila felt it immediately. The looks lingered longer when she walked into work. Conversations paused when she passed. A colleague asked gently if she was okay in a tone that carried warning beneath kindness. She scrolled past headlines late at night, each one heavier than the last. Words like inappropriate, ambitious, calculated floated across screens with no understanding of the woman they described. She had known this might come. Still knowing did not dull the sting. Bradley read everything. He sat alone in the quiet of his recovery room phone, glowing in his hands, jaw tightening with every line. He had lived under scrutiny his entire adult life, but this was different. This was not about his performance or his choices. This was about the woman who had saved him and now carried the weight of suspicion simply for standing near him. Anger rose sharp and unfamiliar. He remembered the laughter in the tunnel. The hesitation, the word just spoken like a verdict. He saw how easily the world erased her skill and replaced it with story, how quickly respect vanished when a woman stepped outside the box assigned to her. He asked her about it the next time she visited. She shrugged with practiced grace and said she had been here before. Different faces, same questions. She spoke without bitterness, but the effort showed in the careful way she chose her words. She had learned long ago that defending herself only fed the fire. Silence was safer, smaller, survivable. Bradley felt something crack inside him then. He realized that loving her quietly might protect him, but it left her exposed. That, standing beside her privately, was not the same as standing with her publicly. He understood that neutrality was a luxury she did not have. The next interview came sooner than expected. A reporter asked about his recovery, then pivoted smoothly toward her, who she was, how they met, whether he worried about boundaries being crossed. The question was wrapped in professionalism but carried old, familiar doubt. Bradley did not hesitate. He spoke her name with intention. He described her skill, her calm, her integrity. He corrected the narrative without raising his voice. He made it clear that his respect for her was earned, not assumed, that his gratitude ran deeper than circumstance. The response was immediate. Some applauded, some scoffed. The scrutiny did not disappear, but it shifted. Lines were drawn. People chose sides. Aila watched from a distance, heart pounding. She had not asked him to do this. She had not wanted to be defended like a possession or displayed as proof. But what he offered was different. It was solidarity. It was choice. When they saw each other again, she thanked him quietly. He told her he meant every word. He told her he was tired of silence that protected comfort at the cost of truth. She looked at him, then really looked. This was not just affection. This was alignment. The world might continue to question her worth, but he no longer would. And he would not allow others to do so unchallenged. For the first time, Aila felt what it meant to be loved in daylight, not hidden, not softened, not excused, seen. And that kind of love carried both risk and redemption. The stadium was alive again, brighter, louder, sharper than before. Lights cut through the night sky, and the crowd surged with anticipation as Bradley Lewis stepped back onto the field. His name rose from thousands of mouths in a single wave, a sound that shook the ground beneath him. He breathed it in, steady and grounded, no longer fueled by hunger for approval, but by something quieter and stronger. At the edge of the field, Aila stood. She did not hide. She did not shrink. She wore no badge of ownership or borrowed importance. She stood exactly where she belonged, calm and composed, her hands folded loosely in front of her. The same grass that had once been stained beneath her knees now brushed her shoes gently, as if in recognition. She felt eyes on her again, some curious, some critical, some searching for a story they thought they already knew. Aila kept her gaze forward, focused on the field, on Bradley, on the simple truth of being present without apology. The game unfolded with intensity and grace. Bradley moved with renewed awareness, every step measured, every hit absorbed with respect for his limits. He played not recklessly, but intentionally, as if he understood now how fragile even the strongest body could be. Each successful play drew cheers that rolled across the stands like waves returning to shore. When the final whistle blew, the crowd erupted. Bradley stood at midfield, chest rising and falling, heart full in a way that surprised him. He scanned the sidelines until he found her. Aila met his gaze without waving, without performing, without fear. Just there. The interview came quickly, cameras pressing and microphones angled upward, waiting for sound bites. Questions flew about recovery, about resilience, about comeback narratives. Bradley answered them smoothly until one voice cut through with careless familiarity. A remark about the nurse who had helped him. A phrase spoken lightly, diminishing and imprecise, as if her role were incidental, as if she were a footnote in his survival. Bradley's expression changed. Not anger, not outrage. Clarity. He corrected it immediately. His voice was steady but unmistakable. He named her not as an accessory to his story, but as part of it. Then without hesitation, without checking the crowd, without glancing toward anyone else, he turned his head and looked directly at Aila. He called her his wife. The words fell into the stadium like thunder. Sound collapsed inward, then exploded outward. Gasps rippled across the stands, followed by stunned silence, and then a wave of noise so raw and uncontained it felt physical. Cameras swung wildly. Commentators stumbled over their reactions. The moment stretched long enough to rewrite everything that had come before it. Aila felt the world tilt. Her breath caught her heart pounding against her ribs as if trying to escape. She did not move. She did not smile. She simply stood rooted in the truth of what had just been claimed. Bradley walked toward her, slowly, deliberately crossing the field with the same confidence he once reserved for victory. This was different. This was personal. When he reached her, he did not speak. He did not need to. The crowd roared around them, but the space between them was still and sacred. Aila lifted her chin. In that moment, she was no longer invisible, no longer questioned, no longer asked to justify her place. She was chosen openly, without caveat or condition. The stadium that once forgot her name now held it in stunned reverence. And love stood where mockery once lived, unafraid and unshaken. For a moment, the stadium did not know how to breathe. Shock rippled outward, first sharp and electric. Then applause rose, uneven and uncertain, before swelling into something thunderous. Cheers collided with disbelief. Voices shouted questions that had no answers yet. The air vibrated with reaction, but beneath it all a deeper stillness settled, heavy and undeniable. Aila did not move. She stood exactly where she was as the meaning of his words pressed into her chest. Wife. The sound of it echoed inside her louder than the crowd ever could. Time stretched thin as memories rushed forward, the laughter in the tunnel, the whispers online, the careful way she had learned to shrink herself to survive. All of it collided with this single, irreversible moment. Bradley walked toward her. He crossed the distance without hesitation, his stride steady and deliberate. Cameras followed him, but he did not see them. The noise chased him, but did not reach him. His eyes stayed fixed on Aila, as if she were the only solid thing left in a shifting world. When he reached her, he stopped close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the familiar grounding presence she had known from the first moment her hands steadied his breath. He did not lower his voice. He did not soften his stance. He stood tall beside her shoulders, squared heart exposed. He chose her, not quietly, not privately, not in the safety of closed rooms. He chose her in front of everyone who had doubted or questioned her, reduced her to speculation and shadow. He chose her knowing exactly what it would cost and exactly what it would give. Aila's throat tightened. She looked at him, then really looked, and saw certainty where fear might have lived. She saw respect shaped into resolve. She saw a man willing to stand in the open and take the weight with her rather than shelter himself behind silence. The crowd watched, breath held. Some faces softened, some hardened, some shifted uncomfortably, confronted with the truth they had been complicit in ignoring. The applause continued, but it was different now, edged with reckoning. Aila reached for Bradley's hand. The contact grounded her, pulled her back into her body, into the moment, into the reality of what they had stepped into together. Her grip was firm, steady, equal. In that simple act, something changed. The love between them was no longer protected by quiet corners or careful distance. It stood exposed to judgment and praise alike. It could be misunderstood, weaponized, doubted, but it could also inspire. It could confront. It could heal. Bradley squeezed her hand once, a silent promise made without performance. He was not rescuing her. He was standing with her. Aila lifted her chin and turned toward the crowd. She did not smile. She did not bow. She met the moment with the same dignity she had carried into every room that underestimated her. She allowed herself to be seen fully without explanation or apology. The silence returned then deeper than before. It was the silence that follows truth when there is nothing left to argue, the kind that forces reflection, the kind that lingers. When they finally walked away together, the noise followed, but it no longer defined them. They had crossed a threshold from private certainty into public truth. There was no retreat now, only forward. And whatever the world chose to do next, they would meet it side by side, unshaken and unafraid. The stadium felt different now. The lights were the same. The seats still rose in endless rows. The grass held the same sharp green beneath the glow. But something fundamental had shifted. The space that once swallowed Aila whole now carried her presence with memory and respect. She walked the edge of the field with ease, no longer bracing herself for dismissal. People noticed her without staring. Some nodded. Some smiled. Some simply stepped aside. Her name moved quietly through the air, spoken without distortion, without doubt. Not because of who she stood beside, but because she had always belonged here. Aila felt it in her body, the release of a tension she had carried for years. The vigilance softened. The careful shrinking eased. She stood taller, not in defiance, but in truth. Being seen did not change who she was. It only revealed what had been there all along. Bradley watched her from a few steps away. He had won games before, broken records, felt the roar of victory crash through him like a wave. None of it compared to this quiet clarity. Loving her had rearranged his understanding of strength. He saw now that greatness did not live only in moments of dominance, but in moments of alignment. In who you honor, in how you choose. He remembered the first time he had truly seen her, not as a savior, not as a symbol, but as a woman kneeling in the grass, holding his breath steady when fear had nearly taken it from him. That memory lived in him, still guiding every step forward. Their love was not loud. It did not ask to be celebrated or consumed. It moved with intention, grounded and resilient. It had been tested in scrutiny and silence, and had not bent. What they shared was not spectacle, but substance. Aila returned to her work, unchanged in purpose, but transformed in presence. Patients trusted her the way they always had. Colleagues listened differently now. The respect was tangible, but she did not cling to it. She had learned that visibility was not a gift to be begged for. It was a truth to be claimed. Bradley returned to the game with renewed focus. Each play carried awareness not just of his body but of his responsibility. He spoke more deliberately, chose his moments carefully. He understood that influence was not only about what you did on the field, but what you stood for when eyes were watching. Together they moved forward without needing to explain themselves. The stadium remembered. It remembered the silence after the fall, the steady hands in chaos, the name spoken with certainty in a tunnel full of doubt. It remembered the moment truth rang louder than mockery. Aila Davis, not invisible, not incidental, seen. And somewhere in the stands, among thousands of voices, a shift lingered, a quiet reckoning, the understanding that dignity cannot be erased by ignorance and love cannot be diminished by fear. Bradley took her hand as they left the field together, not for cameras, not for applause, but because it felt right, equal, certain. Their story did not end with a declaration. It began with recognition. A reminder that the truest victories are not claimed with noise, but earned through courage, presence, and unwavering respect. And that when the world finally sees you, it is not because you changed. It is because you refused to disappear. Before you go, think of the woman who keeps showing up while the world looks past her. This story is for her. Share it. and remind someone they were never invisible. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, drop a comment, and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe to Black Stories Untold for more stories that uncover hidden struggles, celebrate strength, and remind us that every voice matters.